Hello, everyone. Today, I'm in conversation with some Brazilian colleagues, Ana Cristina and Kyria. And today, our topic's going to be coloniality in virtual exchange. But before we get stuck in, can I ask you two to introduce yourselves? So, Ana Cristina, maybe you go first, introduce yourself, what you do and which institution you're affiliated with.
Thank you. I am a professor at São Paulo State University in Brazil, UNESCO. I am from the Modern Languages Department and the Linguistics postgraduate program. But right now, I'm also working in our international office as an assistant provost for internationalization. And in the office, I work with internationalization in general, and I also coordinate the BRAVE program, which is the Brazilian Virtual Exchange Program.
Thank you, Ana Cristina. Kyria, tell us who you are, please.
Yes, I am Kyria Finardi from the Federal University of Espírito Santo. And as Cristina used to work in the language division and then in the internationalization of in the Office of International Relations of the Federal University of Espírito Santo. At undergraduate level at UFES, the Federal University of Espírito Santo, I work with teacher education, especially focused on language teacher education, English, EOT. And at the graduate level in the education program, and have been doing virtual exchange a little bit before the pandemic, since 2019 at UFES.
Thank you both for joining me today. Yes, we're focusing on virtual exchange, but our particular focus today is on coloniality. So perhaps I can ask you, how would you define coloniality in the context of virtual exchange? I don't mind who starts off.
So I started thinking about coloniality before I actually started working with virtual exchange. And we understand coloniality to be interpreted or translated into these power relations and asymmetries in terms of types of knowledge, types of countries, universities, people whose knowledge, whose voices are valued, whereas others are not. And so we, both Ana Cristina and I, who had been working with internationalization of higher education, we were already worried and concerned about coloniality traces and footprints, let's say, in the process of internationalization of higher education, which in the Global South in general and in Brazil in particular, used to mimic or mirror, look to the North very much without looking as, our valuing our knowledge, our contributions, let's say. And, when we started doing virtual exchange, we brought this idea of looking at coloniality footprints and legacies in virtual exchange. Basically, looking at the three eyes of coloniality, which attempt to identify coloniality prints or coloniality legacies, then interrogate those coloniality traces, and if possible, interrupt. So identify, interrogate, and interrupt. And though coloniality or decoloniality has been heralded as a very relevant approach nowadays for higher education in general and for knowledge production in general. The extent to which this perspective has been brought to virtual exchange, I think, is still limited, which I think is an excellent contribution UNICollaboration is doing by offering not only the webinar and this interview, but also the possibility for us to question and to think about the coloniality traces in terms of virtual exchange.
So maybe I can bring Ana Cristina into the conversation as well now. So coloniality or decolonizing the curriculum has been on the agenda for quite some time. Obviously, it is moving into virtual exchange. So how does that manifest itself in the context of virtual exchange then? What are you seeing or happening in your virtual exchanges? Give us some examples.
Yeah, I could give you some examples of what some professors have been doing in terms of like South-to-South partnerships. We all know that in our universities, there is a tendency for professors and even for for stakeholders to want English-speaking partners, to say, oh, we should connect with the global north, we should have English-speaking partners. But there is an encouragement from our side, from the BRAVE program, for me as a coordinator, for them to look to other kinds of partnerships in Latin America or in Africa. So we have had some South-to-South partnerships, even though some of them are in English, which shows that we give a step further on trying to decolonize, but it's hard. Decolonization and the colonization process and narrative, they are complex
well, why are you
questions.
doing them in English then, Ana Cristina, if they're South to South and presumably your participants can speak Spanish and Portuguese? Why are you doing them in English still?
Well, the professors are doing that. So it's the professors, it's not us, it's the professors who are doing. This is an example that I can give, a partnership that we had of a professor of engineering with Chile. So he was in engineering, working with renewable energies, and there was a professor in Chile also with the same topic. And when they elaborated this partnership, they did everything in English. And then I asked him, why did you do that in English? He said, oh, I feel more comfortable using English, and I think my students too. And I said, okay, so because it's complicated to convince them otherwise. But then they did the partnership, and we did focus groups with the students. And then we noticed that the students were using other languages, because the students told us that they spoke Portuñol in their groups. And they, even though they delivered their final works in English, much of the conversation had been done in a multilingual perspective.
That's
so
interesting.
Even though the professor was, maybe the professor was not aware, he's not from linguistics or something to think about that. He thought that he should choose a language that was it. But in the real world, interaction will go other places. And so students were using this other resources that they had.
I see. Kyria, do you want to react to anything that Ana Cristina said? Come in if you'd like.
Yes, absolutely. We've had more or less the same struggles and difficulties at UFIS. To give you practical examples of how we've been trying to decolonize and do this in virtual exchange, as I said, ever since 2019, I think I've had virtual exchange every semester. So I think about 10 projects with 10 different countries at this time. And from the beginning, I've tried to talk to the other teachers, other professors, and international office at UFIS to offer other possibilities, but they were mostly interested with speaking English-speaking countries and partners. Saying that.
Can I just ask, when you say English-speaking countries, are they reinforcing they want contact with the global north, or, for example, India has massive English-speaking population, but does that not count? Or
no, global north. And this is because most of the internationalization efforts and strategies done in Brazil are inductive and induced by national programs and policies, such as CAP Sprint, for example, that has a list of 26 countries with which universities should try to pair or do projects with if they want money, if they want financing resources, meaning that it is okay for us, for example, to have partnerships with Latin America, with Africa, but we don't really get support, financial support for those partnerships. And because partnerships with universities in the global north, for example, they increase or improve the rankings of universities, and internationalization in a way, and as a colonial legacy, is still understood as, looking good in the rankings or having a good position in the rankings, then this was, let's say, a characteristic that had been brought also to virtual exchange projects. So other international collaborations, virtual exchange is one of these possibilities. And so at UFIS, for example, my first collaboration was with Chile, same situation as Ana Cristina is mentioning in the case of UNESCO. And I thought that perhaps by putting together future language teachers, English teachers in Brazil, with future Chilean English teachers in Chile, both who had English as a foreign second language, not as a native language, this would be a way for them to feel empowered, because none of the participants of the virtual exchange were native speakers of English. That worked very well. And then in 2020, I had my first virtual exchange with a university in England. And then when I told my students, pre-service English teachers, that they would be paired up with international students and students from this university in England, they panicked.
They thought their English wasn't going to be up.
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly. And until they realized that the students in the English university were not native speakers of English, they were international students. They were completely shy. I mean, something that most people wouldn't expect from Brazilians. Very talkative, very friendly. But the students were completely shy and embarrassed. They didn't want to speak because they were afraid of judgments in terms of the accent and levels of proficiency in English. And so we try to pair up with different countries, different language backgrounds, to give them the experience of interacting with native speakers, non-native speakers, with the global north, global south. And this is a way for us to identify and question these relations. We saw, for example, that when we have a virtual exchange with some universities in the global north, usually the most powerful universities dictate the program, the type of software that is going to be used, the calendar. So these power relations are also present there.
Absolutely. And I see Ana Cristina nodding furiously there. I know you've been involved in internationalization. So can I ask you to talk a bit about the role of internationalization in this context, Ana Cristina?
Yes, so I think that we have to think of internationalization, first of all, why this happens. Now, it's usually driven by economic imperatives that focus on exporting education and generating incomes from overseas students. We cannot forget this, that it's a income generating activity for universities, for most of the universities. In the case of our universities in Brazil, it is not because, not all of them, I mean, but my university, for example, Kyria's university too, they are public universities. So if we receive students here, they don't pay to study at our universities. But when we send the students abroad, then they will have to pay, unless we have a reciprocity agreement on something that we could do these exchanges. But we have to think about this international student recruitment as a source of income generation for Western universities that emulates colonial structures. Yeah, so we all have our good intentions with internationalization, but we cannot forget this big context behind it. And when it comes to virtual exchange, we all say that virtual exchange is a way to democratize, to give more access to students to international experiences. And I think it is. But as Kyria said, we have to take into account the power relations of countries. And we also have to think about how will virtual exchange expand or survive if it's not generating income. So these are some things of the things that I've been thinking about lately. I don't have answers for that, but I think we should all have this in mind when we are thinking about virtual exchange and the role that it will have in internationalization.
Kyria, you can come in if you have something to add to what Ana Cristina is saying. I'm hearing it's a struggle to redress the balance.
Especially when the aims and objectives of both institutions are not aligned. As Ana Cristina said, public universities in Brazil, for example, they do not depend on external fees and revenues. And so our motivations to internationalize or even to have a virtual exchange or any other kind of academic exchange, physical mobility, for example, are different many times of our partners. And then usually in these power relations and in these projects, usually those who hold more power will dictate the norms, the curriculum, the ethical approval, for example, of the projects. And this may be challenging. To give you one practical example, with a university from Spain, one of my latest virtual exchanges, for example, the university had to use a platform that my students did not have access to. So when my students participated, their participation was limited because there were many functions and many things that my students could not do because of that.
But that's quite a basic issue in virtual exchange anyway, isn't it? To check, you know, with your partners and the institutions, what platforms they have access to, what are they allowed to use, what are they not allowed to use? Because this, you know, in certain countries, you can't use Zoom, you have to use Skype. And these issues seem to be fairly basic things to check. So this is obviously a very long conversation, but some final reflections as we wind down. What needs to change, and how can that be done to redress the balance? Are we moving towards more equality, or are we still far from that? I don't mind who starts.
In a nutshell, in 2 minutes, if we can, I would say, Lorenza, that initiatives such as the one UNICollaboration is doing with the webinars and this interview, for example, is a step forward. I mean, the simple fact that we are ready, able, and willing to interrogate, to identify these traces, and to discuss these issues, I think is advancement. And so I would say that a lot of my colleagues who had been partners with virtual exchange, for example, and whom would in the past perhaps wouldn't have thought of discussing these issues, they are putting these things on the table when we are planning the virtual exchanges. So I would say, yes, there is light in the end of the tunnel. Ana Cristina.
Cristina, come in for some final thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with Kyria. I think we have to be clear about this, to speak openly about this power relations and differences, because some people will just accept this and not question. So what we have to do is to question and to understand that they exist. I don't have right now the name, but there was a publication from an organization, an international organization of internationalization. I can give you that later. That did a survey on the interests for internationalization of the continent. So Europe is more interested in internationalizing with whom? With the United States, or with America, or with Asia, or so what they found out was that Europe was more interested in internationalizing with Europe. Brazil was more, Brazil, or that the Americas were more interested in internationalizing with the global north, but not the global south. So I think that, and this is obvious, we'll be talking about this, but just showing that there is data about that. And what we have to do, I think, is to analyze this data and this. Why do we do this? There are forces, there are bigger forces, like for universities, for example, international rankings are important for the universities. And what counts for these international rankings? When we do collaboration, south-to-south collaborations, we have to understand what do we get out of it, and try to convince our internal stakeholders of what it can bring, what kind of results it can bring, because it's something very complex that depends on a lot of people, on a hierarchy. So we have to think about that. And one final thought, Kyria, here. I don't know if this will go into the interview, but we were talking about Brazil's not being interested in collaborating with the global south. I think it depends on the government. Our government, did you see that there was a call now called Move las Américas, like Move the Americas? So there's a call from our government to bring international students from Latin America to Brazil. So it seems that somehow some eyes are being opened to the need of this south-to-south collaborations in higher places.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's yeah, I could talk for longer. There's a lot to say, but thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and having this fascinating discussion with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lorenzo, so much.
Thank you,
And UNICollaboration, and Francesca, who actually invited us to the webinar. Thank you, Ana Cristina, for this wonderful talk and dialogue that is continuing even after this interview. So thank you very much.